Right, I think with any luck, we're here. We are live, Mr. Fox, just 1 second.
Should I be dancing, Bob?
If you want, if you think that'll add to your vote share.
No, the way I dance.
Good morning, one and all, to whoever is joining us this morning. I'm live with the leader of the Scottish Socialist Party, Mr. Colin Fox. Good morning to you, Colin.
Good morning, Bob. Happy to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Well, let's see what we can unfold. I'm just checking that I've got everything in place here as we're a wee bit rushed. I think we seem to be online. I don't know if anybody's actually with us as yet, but either way, if they join us, they do. Right, Colin, you are standing with the Scottish Socialist Party in all 8 regions, is that correct?
That is correct. I'm not standing in all 8 of them. I'm just standing the same one you're standing in, Bob. So this is our first day.
On the list.
2 candidates with boxing gloves fighting for the vote tomorrow.
No, I'm not sure about this taking votes from other socialists and whatnot. You know, the public are free to choose, shall we say?
Yes.
Colin, the Scottish Socialist Party has a bit of a warm place in my heart, as it does.
That's good, Bob. Mine too.
As it does, as it does for many fellow Scots. Leoski says, "I'm here." Can you just give us a sound check, Leoski, just to let us know if you can hear us loud and clear? Because I've not got any glamorous assistance this morning. But yes, so 1999, you managed to get your first member of the Scottish Socialist Party in Parliament.
Feels like yesterday.
And then the next bunch came in what, 2003 was it?
2003, that's right. We had 6 MSPs, including my good self.
Yeah. And that lasted till when? 2007?
2007, yeah. So the 4 years. The Parliament was 4 years back then. You noticed how they moved it to 5 years without telling anybody?
They grabbed another year on that.
Yeah, I don't know when they done that. 2011, I think they made themselves into 5-year terms.
I'm conscious of that. Yeah. What was that like when you won that seat in 2003? What was that feeling like when you knew you were going to get into the Parliament?
That was brilliant. I mean, I'd like to give you the impression I knew exactly, our psephologists and our team of NASA-inspired technicians had worked out our vote, but people remember me, hurtling across Meadowbank Stadium when I won. I was taken by surprise, partly because my good friend Margot MacDonald and Jim Sillars had took me to one side and said, "Listen, big man, you've done really well, but you've no won, right?" So Margot said, "Dignity, always dignity," from singing in the rain. So I took her advice to heart and I belted across Meadowbank Stadium like a rabbit at a Pounder Hall. So I was perfectly expecting that result. We got 6 MSPs, the highest result, remember, that any socialist had ever had in elections in Scotland.
Yeah. When the SSP were in the Parliament, Scotland was a better country.
It was, yeah. No, that's true.
In my opinion, I don't know whether these things are directly related, but Scotland did seem to be a better country, and there was certainly, for those of us who were politically minded or whatever, there was a sense of pride that we had in this new Parliament, that we had a socialist representation there. And this is something that I dearly wish to have repeated. I would like to see socialists back in the Parliament.
Yeah, me too. I mean, there was a sense of expectation. Remember, this was a new Parliament. There was a real sense of we could do things our own way. This is a new Parliament. First time in 300 years we'd be able to take our own decisions. And in that Parliament in 2003, as well as 6 SSP, you had 7 Greens and 5 Independents. So there was 18 of us in the back benches able to cause trouble.
Yeah.
And we did some profound things. I think your point about Scotland was better then is allied to the fact that, unfortunately, in the past 23 years, Scotland has moved to the right. That's a sad fact. I don't welcome it. And it's harder to be a socialist now than it ever has been.
People don't realise that people talk about the centre, but the centre is almost a bit of the right these days, isn't it?
I love that phrase. Tariq Ali calls it the extreme centre. The extreme centre. These are the privatisers, these are the warmongers, these are the corporate capitalists, these are the globalisers, these are the people who are forcing down your wages, these are the people that say you can't have any council houses anymore, privatising our hospitals. That's the extreme centre.
Yeah, definitely. And when you look at since you left the Parliament in 2007, and you see what's happened to Scotland, and you see what you made a good point when we were talking just before you went on camera there, that we forget that back in those days, because we've become so inured, we've become so it's almost like the SNP have always been in power. That wasn't the case, though,
no, they weren't.
When you were in Parliament.
Remember, when I was the First Minister, Jack McConnell was the First Minister. When I was in the Parliament, Jack McConnell was the First Minister. The first two Parliaments was a Labour-Liberal coalition. The SNP weren't at the races. They were to be seen. John Swinney was the SNP leader back then. Didn't he do a great job? I'm not speaking out of turn here, even they thought so. And they bumped him and they brought back Salmond, remember? So the SNP weren't at the races, and it was a different Parliament. I think those MSPs that I mentioned, ourselves, the Greens, the Independents, got elected on the basis of the antipathy towards Blair. He was the hate figure. Yeah,
totally. Tell me, when you look at the state of the country now, what do you think? Do you when you look at what's your opinion on the SNP's governance over this last 20 years? Has it been a steady decline, do you think, or do you feel that, is there anything that you hold them in respect for, or have you become disillusioned with them? I mean, obviously,
I didn't have any respect for them to begin with. The SNP are managerialists.
Definitely.
All Scotland's first ministers, from Donald Dewar right through to Swinney, they're managing capitalism, they're managing the system, they're managing corporate Edinburgh, they're managerial, they've got no fresh ideas, they're not going to change anything. John Swinney, I mean, people refer to him as the bank manager, like Captain Mainwaring from Dad's Army, right? He's not going to change the circumstances working class people face. He's not going to build the council houses we need in this city. He's not going to redistribute the wealth of this city, Edinburgh, 5th richest financial centre in Europe. So it's not just, there's plenty of money around. They're not going to change the circumstance where the money goes to them that already got it. And if you've not got it, you're increasingly in bigger and bigger trouble.
Why do you think that they still receive such a strong support? I mean, obviously the
SNP?
Yeah.
I think the SNP look like they're going to be the biggest party in this election tomorrow, Friday, when the results. But it's an anti-Labour vote. Working class people that I know and I've met, and you've met them too, Bob, in the course of the election, they're voting for the SNP because they're sick to the back teeth of Starmer and Labour, and the fact they backstabbed them for 2 years ago, promised change. Where is that change? The change got worse. That's what happened under Starmer. Warmongering, cuts, attacking the benefits of people with disabilities, ratting on the waspy women. We could be here all day. It's an anti-Labour mood. And in Scotland, at least in the last, 10 or 15 years, to demonstrate your opposition to Labour, people have voted SNP. It's tribal. I don't like Labour anymore. I vote for the SNP. I look at you, Bob, you and me about the same age. I might be right or wrong there, give a few years. But Labour used to be a one-party state in Scotland.
Yeah.
Everybody voted Labour.
Yeah.
Now they're going to be third.
Yeah.
They're humped. They're finished. It's over.
Yeah.
And people in the main are voting SNP to stop Labour. After the election, that's when Swinney's problems start big style, because he's not going to change anything.
But we also have also this fracture where there's also a significant section of working class votes as well that are also going to be voting for reform, and that's a given as well.
Correct.
And that's also a reaction towards the SNP in some respects as well.
But it's a bigger reaction towards Labour. Those people are voting reform. It's the same as down south. Here we've got a uniform British-wide development. Britain, England, Wales and Scotland at least, big proportion of people are so scunnered with Starmer, they're voting for reform as an, I believe this or not, Bob, they see reform as an anti-establishment force. It's incredible, isn't it? Farage, this guy offered, what's he got, 5 houses, 7 cars, 9 boats. Stop the boats, stop him getting any more boats, It's incredible. But their vote is coming from people who would never have voted Tory in the past.
Yeah.
And this is a hard right Tory party. So funny enough, Reform and the SNP are getting the same vote from the same wellspring. Yeah. It's an antipathy towards Labour.
Well, I concur with that, definitely.
It's that kind of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. If you hate Farage, if you hate Starmer, who does Starmer hate the most? He hates Farage hates. so they're voting for him. It's bonkers.
What do you think about the wider pathologisation of socialism, of the left wing, this type of thing that's occurred over this last 10, 15 years? You know, we've had this explosion of. We've had almost like the rise and fall of identity politics, if you want to call it that, which really obfuscated class politics in so many ways. This was something that happened essentially post your tenure in Parliament. Essentially, this was less prevalent when you were actually had some power, right? Have you got any thoughts about that?
I mean, I'm still trying to work out what the word pathologisation means. I can't even pronounce it right. But you're right in the sense that people, if you forget that the essence of politics, this is class. This is about the rich and the poor. This is about working class people. We have to sell our labour every day. People have forgotten. If you've not got a job and you've not got a wage, you can't pay your rent. You can't pay to get, your kids a meal on the table, etc. Working class people have got to remember the values that perhaps their parents taught them and their grandparents had them. The idea we stand up for ourselves together. We're collectively strong, we're individually weak. And that's forgotten about. I've had the benefit, in the last couple of weeks, I was on the picket line twice. Once at Napier University, where the staff there were on strike, another one at Edinburgh University. And it was really encouraging to see people standing up against forced redundancies, compulsory redundancies. Because they know on the one hand, the price of everything's going up. Food, petrol, council tax, your rent, etc. You lose your job, you're in the gutter. You're in big trouble. The idea that you're somehow protected from that, with less protection than we did 20 years ago when I was in the Parliament, and that's the truth of it. Mm-hmm. That's still a truth. Your point is perhaps people have forgotten certain truths and they've been deluded into thinking the boss will look after you. The council will look after you. Somebody will get you. You win the lottery, then your next door neighbour will win the lottery. It's all going to be taken care of by somebody else. You have to stand up together. That's a basic class concept. That's what socialists have already understood.
But the point being as well, though, that with the state of our sort of corporate politics, with the managerial class that are there, we also have a media class that are very much their propagandists. Mm-hmm. And so there's not very much space for kind of different ideas or concepts or deeper conversations to find their way into the public consciousness. People are either, they're grafting to try to make ends meet, they're distracted by all the other things that are going on. It's very difficult for them to become cognizant and conscious of these, which are basic, obvious factors, as you say. You know what I mean? That at one point in our culture and our society, we're there, and the political classes or the politicians had to cater to the class of people who represented the working class. But with that atomisation, whether it's cultural or social or all these other factors, these ideas have been taken away from the communities that need them most.
I would say that's true, Bob. The corporatisation, you call it, the power of the media, etc. Right, but both those groups, organisations, forces, if you like, nowhere near as powerful that they'd like you to believe. Look at the media, for example. You mentioned the media. When I was growing up, the Daily Record was the powerhouse in the country. Every day, working class people across Scotland, they bought the Daily Record, square sliced sausage and 4 rolls to take home. The Daily Record sold, well, you had a family. Anyway, don't eat them all yourself. But the Daily Record used to sell 850,000 copies a day. It was a newspaper. It was the sort of Bible that you read the sports pages, you read. Now look at the Daily Record. It's lucky if it'll survive much longer.
Yeah.
The media is the same. It's atomised, but they're all weak.
Yeah.
They don't last 5 minutes. I mean, would you recommend to the next generation of young workers to get a job in newspapers? Well,
no,
I wouldn't.
No,
I don't think it's got a future.
Of course not. I think the interesting thing, though, is that when we look at the controlled nature of Scottish politics and Scottish political discourse, there's something I wanted to mention to you, that if you look at the dominant narrative throughout this election, both through the mainstream and these kind of proxy alternative bodies of alternative media in Scotland, the dominant narrative is that this has been the worst election ever. It's the May election, I think they're calling it. It's, they know there's going to be a low turnout. There's huge voter apathy and all this kind of stuff. But what I've experienced as an independent candidate throughout the hustings that I've been going to and the various people I've been talking to, there is actually another story to this election, and I wonder whether you've got a sense of that as well, that when you're actually speaking to people in the streets and when you're actually having conversations with people, there is a different type of dynamic going on there than the one that we're being sold by the media.
Yes and no. I'd say yes and no. First thing is, all the other elections were pretty boring too. Everyone where I lose, they're boring, right? But you're right in the sense that the big issue in this election has been the cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
It's real, it's out there, you're struggling with it every day. You're watching the newspapers and they're saying, where's the price of petrol going to go? Where's the price of my rent? The landlords are running amok and the price of food will follow the price of petrol. And you're like that's the real anxiety. But you wouldn't know that from that narrative. You wouldn't know it for the leaders' debates. You wouldn't know it from any of the thousands of press releases that are churned out every day by the big parties talking about God knows what that's no relevant to any of that.
Yeah.
And that's why, to put the icing on the cake of your question, is 50% of people are not going to vote. Who are they? They're the people who are worried most about the cost of living crisis, because they're like that. None of these parties are going to do hee-haw for me. I'm going to have to carry this on my own. And I've been saying to people, Friday the 8th or 9th of May will follow the 7th as usual. Nothing will change with these people.
No.
We're going to have to pick up the mantle and make change ourselves. That was the history of the poll tax struggle. You're talking about the SSP. The Scottish Socialist Party came out of the anti-poll tax struggle where 16 million people in Britain defied the law and said, I've not got the money to give you £1,500 in council tax, or poll tax as it was then. I've no got it. Come ahead if you're hard enough. I'm no paying it because I've no got it.
Yeah.
And the Scottish Socialist Party is the daughter of that struggle.
Yeah, very, very true. The council tax that then came in wasn't that much better, was it?
Wasn't it?
You've got a plan to if you manage to get into power,
We'll scrap it. We'll scrap it.
Yeah.
We put forward the bill before the other parties voted it down, but we want to replace the council tax with something based on your income. Remember, the council tax now is going to be your income. It's based on some notional value of your house. I live in the Inch. The boffin at the City Chambers goes, right, yeah, we want £2,500 out you because that's the size of your house, etc. You're going, what happened? I've not got £2,500. We're wanting something based on your ability to pay, where those with mayor, like Lord Offord or Lord Snooty, whatever his name is, he'll pay more because he should pay more.
Yeah.
And those who, the poll tax's great weakness was that Thatcher comes along and says the king in the castle will pay the same as the serf in the hovel.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, it should be based on what you're able to pay.
Yeah.
So we'll scrap it, and 8 out of 10 working class people, 8 out of 10 will be better off.
Yeah.
Save yourself £2,000 towards the cost of living crisis that one measure.
We've got some people in the chat here. Let me see what folk are saying here. I think we've got a couple of questions for you. Solidarity from the Communist Party to you both.
Thank you
need
kindly.
More of this. Fox for First Minister.
Here. That was me that submitted that question.
He knows what he's talking about. Have I got
that was for John Swinney.
I've lost my mouse. Believe it or not.
I think it's in here in the flare with me. It's got that Havana virus or whatever it's called.
Teamus. There we go, okay. If anything, you're a teeny bit quieter than Colin. Right, well, there we go.
You're quieter than me, Bob. They don't know you very well, do they? You're on here every week.
Up to the ante. Who ate all the rolls? All right, okay. They
were just small rolls. There were many rolls. I don't want you to see out of proportion. The front page of the papers tomorrow. He ate all the Fox ate all the pies.
I wondered where Colin had gone. I voted for him in the past.
That's my missus.
Please, we have Chris, Colin and Bob to choose from on the ballot. Well, maybe be careful who you choose for.
You need a really big X to get the three of them covered in the same box.
I have a question for Colin Fox, but is yet to submit the question. Well, please do, Groynes. Please submit your question to Colin. Right, let me ask another couple. What have I got written down here? Okay, so we've had, since you left the Parliament, you've seen the extreme managerial class move in. There's no working class representation at Holyrood at present of any substance.
Nope.
And that's a travesty for the whole of the country. When the working class are removed from all aspects of culture, the more the working class is removed from society, the worse we are all off collectively. Whether that's culturally, whether that's socially, politically, or otherwise. This is a fact. Obviously, I come from I'm an artist. I come from a cultural perspective often when I'm looking at these things. But if you look at Trevor Griffiths, the guy, the famous playwright.
I know Trevor. Yeah, he wrote the screenplay for Reds.
Yeah, he wrote the comedians and whatnot.
Yeah.
He was very kind to me a few years ago when he was still with us, and he sent me a very glowing endorsement for some work that I had done. But I was led to a film that a series that Trevor had made in the 70s, just round about the time that I was born. It's called Bill Brand, and it was. Do you remember it? Right?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And it was about a by-election where the guy went in. He went in as the Labour MP. And it was essentially 11 episodes of him becoming increasingly disillusioned with the way that the party was going, and it was a phenomenal piece of work. It depicted the rise of essentially what was to become the neoliberal era and the disintegration of the old order of the workers' rights and whatnot. And so it was a fantastic piece of programming. Yeah. Also done at a snail's pace, almost theatrical. Where come in, Bill, make a cup of tea. Go and speak to his old man upstairs.
Have a roll.
And then they would eat a fucking roll. You know what I mean? Like they would literally eat it on screen. But the thing that fascinated me about things like Bill Brand and things like that was that Bill Brand had a regular viewership of 11 million people.
Wow.
11 million people
on ITV
were watching a programme about a Labour by-election in the north of England, and a story of a guy that went into Parliament. This had 11 million regular viewers. And this is when we get all these performative arguments about there's not enough working class people in the arts. It's like there's not just not enough working class people in the arts, there's just not enough working class anywhere. Do you know what I mean? And this is an issue. And
No, and by the way, what comes to mind when speaking to you, Bob? Ken Loach, Paul Laverty and Ken Loach. Yeah. More power to them, because they're one of the few voices that reflect working class existence, life, culture, what our passions are, right? Ken Loach is well into his 80s now and all that. Show me another director, another screenmaker like Paul and Ken Loach in the last 25 years, and the list isn't very big, is it?
No, not at all.
We get full of monosodium glutamate, the repetition of traitors and, I'm a celebrity, shoot me now, whatever they're called, and that. It's guff, man. It's just mind-blowing guff. There's nothing that reflects Z-Cars was groundbreaking in its time, softly. These were the guys, like you said, Trevor Griffiths, smashing guy. They broke the mould. Yeah. We need to take the mould and chuck it down the sewer of what's left today, what's presented as our culture's alien to us. We create our culture. Yeah. We want, where are the screenwriters from, West Pilton? Where are the musicians coming from the inch?
This is the thing. I mean, this is why I'm very, I've never stopped banging this drum about wanting the Quango Creative Scotland to be disbanded and broken up entirely and reimagined, where that money starts going into community arts and those funds are redirected.
They're products of the Extreme Centre as well, to be honest with you. Creative Scotland's part of the Extreme Centre. They commission things that the Extreme Centre want. It's the same old. Yeah. I think, if you remember Billy Elliot.
Yeah.
The film Billy Elliot, fantastic. I remember taking issue with that film. My pal Gary he played the father in it. Gary was in The Young Socialist with me, right? And Gary didn't take this view, but see the bit that village in Durham would have disowned that young laddie because he was a ballet dancer. That's garbage, man. Garbage. That village would have loved them to death for bringing that village and what it produces to the world outside. Ballet dancing, opera, it doesn't matter. The guy was profoundly talented, and it shows what comes out of pit villages given half the chance.
Yeah, definitely. A couple of questions here. Somebody says, and now the council tax is about £3,000 a year. I'm a big supporter of most of your policies, but can we also pair those with mass remigration and strict immigration policy? I think your party would do a lot better going down that road. How do you want to address this? This is a big issue in certain areas at the minute. I was in the sandwich shop this morning, and there was somebody wanting everybody rounded up and sent back, the rest of it. We've got this almost 1970s rhetoric entering the public discourse, which is disappointing. But what's your way to address this?
I think we need to address it on the basis of providing people with actual information that's accurate. Farage and Reform are trying to scapegoat immigrants for problems that they have nothing whatsoever to do with. The real problems that we face, the lack of council houses, jobs, poor wages, other things that we've talked about in the last 10 or 15 minutes, the responsibility for them are in the City of London, the City of Edinburgh, the same politicians that we talked about in the last 15 minutes, nothing to do with people who come to this country in pursuit of a better life. My ancestors were from Ireland, like so many other people. That's a brave and honourable thing to do, to uproot yourself from all you know and leap into the unknown. And the other fact is, Scotland's population's going down. We need people to come here, for goodness sake. Look at this social care sector. You know, in the inch where I live, men and women from Ghana, from elsewhere, coming to look after, in effect, my elders, you know, my mum and dad, people like it and other. Where would the care sector be without people coming to help us? I'm in favour of people. I want people to come to Scotland. It's empty. We need your help. So the debate on immigration, chancellors like Farage are trying to pull the wool over your eyes, blame people who are not responsible for the problems, and at the same token, let the real culprits off scot-free. That's the message we need to get out there, and urgently.
Yeah. We still have a degree of inherent hostility there that's been whipped up, and it's garnered. You know, they've poured petrol on those flames basically that have always been sort of burning away. How do you feel that these issues are not going to get addressed by the parliamentarians that are going to be back in power again on Friday, are they?
They aren't. But by the way, I'm not worried about reform. They're headbangers. They haven't got a solution to any of the problem. Their economic policies are nuts, they're crackerjack stuff, and so is the rest of them. In likelihood, on Thursday and Friday, if 20 reform MSPs get elected, they'll all be clowns. They couldn't speak. They couldn't probably cohere a sentence. They certainly can't solve the problems that we're confronting. So, you know, I'm not frightened about it. But the answer is how do you change MSPs' minds? And you were asking me earlier about my experience in the Parliament was to be constantly told what I can't talk about. And no, Colin, you can't talk about the war in Iraq. This is 2003. Colin, you can't talk about unemployment. That's reserved to Westminster. You can't talk about equality for men and women. You can't talk about this, that and the other. But the reality is, politics and change in Scotland comes from outside the Parliament, not inside. You put a Bunsen burner under the MSP's backside and you watch how they change their opinions, because they're desperate to know what the mood of the population was.
Without a question, without doubt. You know, we were always aware of that. You know, I mean, if you can change the public perception out, why you soon see them shifting.
Correct,
on their
because their
positions.
salary is also in jeopardy. Then, innit? They want their £75,000 a year, and if it means changing their mind, they'll change their mind because they want to keep the money.
Yeah, totally. What about the state of our NHS? We've now got private hospitals in Scotland. People aren't aware of this.
Outrage. An absolute outrage. Bob, there's 8 of them in Scotland, 2 in Edinburgh. Edinburgh's Royal Infirmary, owned by a company called Consort Healthcare. Right across the road from it, there's the Sick Kids Hospital, owned by Macquarie Capital Solutions of Sydney, Australia. There's 6 others like that in Scotland. NHS hospitals, owned by private companies. And Aaron Bevan would be spinning in his grave. It's an outrage. That's why the NHS is facing the biggest crisis in its history. Privatisation, chronic underfunding, and leaders who don't support the founding principles that it was established on in 1948 by your grandparents and my grandparents.
What do you think about when people look at the NHS and they talk about the innumerable complexities of how problematic it is and all the rest of it? Do you think there's a question of there's too much bureaucracy in it, or do you think that's a kind of a distractive argument about it? The
NHS. My mum was a nurse at Law Hospital in Killook for 42 years, and she explained to me when the NHS was established, and Aaron Bevan and the people who decided to set it up looked around. When you consider how colossal the organisation needs to be to provide health care at the point of need for 40 or 50 million people, you need a colossal organisation. And the only one they could think of to compare it with and structure it was the army. So it was set up on the basis of the same kind of foundation structures as the army. A lot wrong with that. But the main essence that the NHS has got to be protected. The essence of it is that it's paid for out of our taxes. It's free at the point of need, and it tries to provide the best quality healthcare that is available based on the science and technology at that time.
But
that model hasn't got to be thrown out.
It is in crisis, though. I was speaking to a couple of nurses, a couple of nurses just a few days ago, and they were saying that morale is horrendous for nurses. It's absolutely horrendous. They said it's never been. One lady had been working in NHS for 40 years, and she was just waiting to retire. And she said she'd completely and utterly given up.
And the reason for that, because they're short-staffed. There's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of vacancies in the NHS right across Britain. So the reason you're demoralised is in COVID. How many nurses and care staff do you know that said to you, Bob, see when this COVID's over, this pandemic's over, I'm out of here. I've had enough of this. I can't cope with the people dying in front of me. No proper adequate resources, no proper staffing. And a lot of them retired or went, understandably. But it leaves a bigger hole for those who are left to fill. There's a colossal understaffing problem in NHS. I see that, you see that every time you use it. Whether it's the GP services in South Edinburgh, whether it's the Royal Infirmary waiting 12 hours when you go to accident emergency, waiting lists, waiting times. It's not because the staff don't want to treat you, there's no staff there to treat you. And I suffered that. My dad died a year past at Christmas, waiting for an ambulance in Motherwell. It never came. He died. And he was under the care of something called hospitals at home, but didn't exist. That's the nature of the crisis. I'm certainly not going to sit here and say it's not a crisis. It is. It's the worst it's ever been. I want to look at why there's a crisis, and then more importantly, how do we solve it? And it needs more staff, more money, and a fundamental protection of this idea. We've got the best health service model in the world. If you're ill, you get treatment. They don't check your credit card. They don't send you away like America to die in the street. 60 million Americans don't have any health insurance. And who are they? They're the poor. Working class people, black, white, Mexican, whatever. No health. That's hideous. No having that here.
Totally. Scottish Labour.
Never heard of them. What did they do?
They're spending an awful lot of money on. They're spending obscene amounts of money on their social media campaign. It's insane.
It's a waste, then, isn't it? Next week, and his Sarwar's gone. They should get a refund.
Well, for Patter alone, you should be getting elected.
Tell you what, man. We haven't spent anything, and we're going to win.
The Patter politician, I think. Here's somebody. Skilly G has a question here. Hi, Colin. The SSP calls for a vastly expanded, integrated, free public transport system. How does this look in Edinburgh? Do you support the tram train proposals for the South Suburban Line?
Well, I live in the south and I want to see a tram, South Suburban. I live in the Inch, and the tram might as well be in Mars, considering how much it is to me. But see, on the free public transport policy, what your viewers and listeners might not appreciate, we put forward this policy when I was in the Parliament for free public transport, and it was a climate change issue. We said, if you want to give people an alternative to their car, and driving round the Edinburgh City bypass to work and back for work, which is a miserable experience, driving to Glasgow and Edinburgh on the M8, which has got to be one of the biggest car parks in the world, another miserable experience, then give them a better alternative. And that better alternative is free buses. I know the Greens are in free buses, but that's where they stop. They're at the bus stop. We want free trains, we want free trams, we want free underground in Glasgow, free ferries. Give people a better alternative to leave their car at home, and they'll take it. And in Edinburgh, I want to see an expanded tram system. Remember, it was invented to go from the Royal Bank of Scotland's headquarters at York Place out to Gogurburn.
But it was supposed to go to the hospital. That's why they built the hospital there. And the tram is still not at the hospital. But the problem with the tram is that a lot of the tram is basically in cahoots with private developers who still haven't even built a lot of these developments. So, and if you look at where the tram stops are often centred, it's where there's going to be new developments built, so it's not servicing the existing communities in that respect.
So then we have to fight for the route. As I understand it, it's going to Cameron Toll. That'll save me. I can walk up the road. So it goes to the Royal Infirmary.
So you're in favour of it going up over the bridges?
I mean, the thing is, it's like, will it happen in my lifetime? I don't know. It's going to take a long time.
There is a lot. There is, it's true. There is, for as much as although saying that, they've reinforced the bridge because they want to take the tram over it. This is why it's taken so long. That's
that
why
helps. Otherwise, it would only be one stop. top.
But if you look at the waste of public funds, for example, on some of these projects, that's something that has to be looked at. Is how much public money is being thrown.
No, you're right. You're right in that
projects.
regard. I mean, I argued against the tram in the beginning because
what
I thought.
What are you saying then, Colin?
No, but hold on. The reason I argued against it at the beginning was the £500 million that was put aside. I wanted that in council housing. I wanted it spent on the priorities that the people of the city had made it clear they wanted, and the tram wasn't it. So, that was the argument then, right? Now that we've got it, it needs to be a proper tram system. And by the way, the tram, remember, in conjunction with the buses, is the last remaining public transport system in Britain. Glasgow's no got public transport that's owned by the public, is it? No. LRT is owned by us.
True, but there are arguments. There are suggestions that there are maybe better transport solutions other than the tram. There's electric bendy buses. There's these types of things that could be looked at. The idea that the tram is extremely costly. It's as an associate of mine, capitalist associate of mine, Norrie Dowen says, but he often says it's yesterday's technology at tomorrow's prices. Which I think
cut my links with all my capitalist pals and all that. I don't have any capitalist pals.
All right,
I only spoke to you, Bob. You've got a capitalist pal by proxy.
Oh, come on.
No, but the thing is, I'm in favour of the trams and the buses. The tram's fine. The trams will not be able to go everywhere, will they? Cameron Toll's not as near as it could be to my house. I'm in favour. You
just want a tram at your gaff. That's what's this.
Yes, when I'm the MSP, I'll have a personal tram and nobody else will travel except me.
Stranger things
and there'll be a bar
and
there'll be a camera there, right? And it'll be decked out in Motherwell's colours, a nice neutral colour for the city.
It's a claret and amber insurgency, that's what we've got going
Change
on here.
delivery right away. That's my main demand.
Brilliant. Okay, so housing. You've got a plan for housing. This is your main policies are the cost of living and housing, which are admirable and correct.
And connected. They're both connected, aren't they?
Yeah, of course.
I grew up in a council house in Motherwell. When I was growing up, everybody lived in council houses. In Motherwell, 60-70% of the population lived in a council house. It was rare to find an owner-occupier, as they were called then, right? Now in Edinburgh, my kids will say to me, "What's a council house? What's a coal miner? And the answer to the housing crisis in Edinburgh is to build houses people can afford for rent, publicly owned. We want 100,000 council houses built across Scotland. That's the main plank of the SSP's policy to solve the housing crisis. And the reason
it's still quite a low number. I mean, I don't mean to be. It's an admirable.
That's 100,000 by a parliament. 100,000.
Okay.
Considering that's next to nothing just now is a giant leap for mankind, right? Yeah. But what are they? They're council houses, so they're for rent. They're publicly owned. The housing stock's publicly owned. We want the highest quality, and they're affordable. The average house of a price a house in Edinburgh in excess of £300,000 a year. How do you get one of them on 26,000? It doesn't happen, right? The only people who are buying £300,000 houses are folk who've got £200,000 houses to sell. So, and one of the big questions you're entitled to ask me, Colin, the Scottish Socialist Party's been asking for that for 20 years now. How's it not happened? And the answer is the private housing developers don't want it to happen. If you put 100,000 council houses on the market,
value of the houses
exactly, your house goes from 300,000 down to 200,000. So there's a vested interest there by people who own their house, and we have to say to them, this isn't something to be played with on the stock exchange. A house is your right. The right to affordable accommodation is an inalienable human right that everybody in this city is entitled to have. And when everybody's entitled to have that, then you can play Monopoly with the house that you've got if you want to buy and sell houses. In the meantime, you've got to provide for everybody. That's a basic socialist concept.
What do you find about the notion that when you've got, like, for example, the SNP, that they'll propagandise and they'll talk about affordable housing? It's not affordable, is it?
No, of course not. It's a joke. Affordable, what, £300,000 houses? See, where I live in the Inch, so you're going out towards the bypass. They used to be farms. Now it's all new housing developments, starting at £500,000. You're like that. And the whole development, maybe there's 300, 400 houses, and there's maybe 10, what they call affordable housing, and they're usually flats. So it's no back and front garden. It's no the nice big driveway, etc. So, and it's almost like that's tokenism. The developers put in 10 that are cheaper than all the rest, so he can get the 200 or 300
But then this was
back.
the issue that we had with the student flats as well, is because the student flats, there was no obligation to build any social housing or any affordable housing with the student properties, which is one of the reasons the developers were favoured for that. And that you see the carnage that's caused in the city and what that's done to the town.
This is where both the council and the Scottish Parliament got to step in and say the City of Edinburgh's priority is not to build more student accommodation. These are dormitories. I've seen them. Do you know there's one room you study, there's a toilet there. That's not a house, that's not a flat.
I mean, the great Marxist philosopher David Harvey, he says, we're building cities to invest in, not to live in anymore. Which
brilliant.
Is
I know David Harvey. He used to be in goals for Scotland. Anyway, but that's a different David Harvey. He's fantastic, I follow him a lot,
Eusebio.
Eusebio, the socialist centre forward.
Beldam Lascar says, very expensive trying to give Sarwar a personality. you like that one, Colin?
And Sarwar will go back to dentistry, I think.
It's almost as if building houses could fix homelessness, somebody says.
Imagine that, that would be a possibility,
this is a class duo right here. Well, okay, we'll take that as a
class duo. That's a commentary on the quality of our broadcast, isn't it? That's
Stuart
marvellous.
Jackson says, free transport also manufacture the buses, trams, trains, cars for car share and taxis.
Yeah, and by the way, they're trying to close the bus factory in Falkirk. So the buses are going to get built in China. No, we need manufactured buses here in Scotland too.
A guy messaged me on Twitter the other day there, and he was going on about wanting coal mining reintroduced to Scotland. Have you got any opinion on that? He said if you guarantee that you'll reintroduce coal mining to Scotland, I'll tell my pals in Edinburgh Central to vote for you. That's what he said.
Well, tell him as long as
which pals he's got in Edinburgh Central that are going to be susceptible to this particular manifesto pledge.
As long as he's prepared to dig it, I'm in favour of bringing it back.
Under the fourth,
I don't know there's many pits in Edinburgh Central, but I'm prepared for him to look and see.
What else have we got? You wanted to renegotiate PFI, which I think is a very sensible thing to do. I think we're paying for the Royal Infirmary, which doesn't have a tram, which is under provision in terms of what it actually has. I think we're paying for it till about sometime in the next century or something, given the PFI deal.
Well, the key thing about it, Bob, is remember, and I wouldn't want people to lose sight of this fact, building a new Royal Infirmary was necessary, right? The old one at Lauriston had been built in the 1700s or something, and if the NHS had built it, we're talking about 350 million, around about. The PFI, 1.2 billion, which meant that there's 900 million has went west. It's went out of the NHS, no to operations, no to extra stuff. It's went to the Royal Bank of Scotland, and they're all 3 times more expensive, whether it's Hare Myers in East Kilbride, Wishaw General, Stobhill in Glasgow, Dumfries Royal Infirmary, the south wing of the Victoria in Kirkcaldy. It's money pouring out of the NHS into the baskets of these very capitalists and financiers. And you pal about me?
No. The building itself up at Lauriston was sold for £1 as well. Another travesty.
Yeah.
The best way to predict your future is to create it. Good luck to you both for Thursday. Okay, so profound. A true awakening for many. Can you see a second referendum being achieved or granted in our lifetime? At what possible radical routes could be looked at to help the cause? Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Colin?
brilliant question. I'm in favour of another referendum. I'm in favour of another referendum that we win. And, John Swinney's saying if he gets a majority for the SNP, or even if him and the Greens get together and get a majority of the seats in the Scottish Parliament, he'll go asking for a second referendum. That's fine. What happens when they tell you to beat it? You're not getting a second referendum. The difference between the Scottish Socialist Party's attitude and the SNP's is we're going to have to develop the tactic of civil disobedience. We're going to have to say to Westminster, we want a second referendum, we want independence. If you won't give us it, we're going to make you an offer we can't refuse. You can't refuse. And that civil disobedience has got many different facets, many things you can do. But Swinney needs to think that through. What happens when you get sent back with your tail between your legs? We say, we don't care that you only get 35% of the vote in the Holyrood election. Don't care you've got 65 or 70 MSPs, you're still not getting it. Then what? And that's when we start getting serious about independence. And Bob, I'm in favour of an independent socialist Scotland, a modern democratic republic, just like James Connolly, just like John Maclean, just like Lenin. They're people who supported independence for Scotland a damn sight longer than the SNP, who set it up in the 1930s.
You've adopted a James Connolly principle when it comes to your proposed remuneration. Should you achieve seats in the Parliament, which is that you're only going to take a worker's wage, which is what you did the first time round as well. Didn't you?
There's a novelty. We did what we said we'd do. We did what we said we did. I mean,
such a rarity.
Yeah,
in
what can I say?
politics.
The Scottish Socialist Party presents workers' MSPs and workers' wages, precisely as you mentioned your great hero James Connolly, who said you rise with your class, not out of it. You don't get elected living in the inch and start moving to Ravelston Dykes with your nice big Mercedes and your 3 holidays a year, etc. You rise with your class, not out of it. I did it. All SSP MSPs did it. We did it for 8 years. So we're saying it again, and we're saying we're standing as workers' MSPs and workers' wages. For me, it meant I was getting £55,000 a year as an MSP in that period I was there. I think the salary's about £75,000 now. I haven't paid that much attention. But my salary, £55,000, I got £25,000 because that was what the salary of the people who sent me there got. And that was Connolly. Rise with your class, not out of it. And we'll do the same again. So if people think, it's just a promise, they're full of promises. Yeah, well, we did it.
Well,
it's a
very principle. I mean, I've heard socialists tell me that they didn't think that was a necessary principle for you to adhere to. But
well, then we disagree with them.
Yeah.
I've heard this argument saying it's the rate for the job, Colin. It's the rate for the job. You should take the £75,000 a year. That's no the argument here. The argument is I'm no there to represent the 1% of the population who get the same wages as an MSP. 1%. I'm there to represent the 99%. And most of the people who vote for me will never see £75,000 a year or anywhere near it. So they're wrong. It's a difference of opinion. We share it. We speak to it.
Respect. Tell me, we're living in a time of extreme capitalist crisis for those of us that are interested in the structures of capital and how they connect to even our local and our domestic politics and whatnot. It's something that a lot of people don't even have as part of their conversation, which I think is part of the problem in many ways. This is the triumph of...
It's the real nature of the world. You need to get used to it. You need to, educate yourself. That was the great socialist 100 years ago. They said working class people have got to educate themselves. You've got to learn. You've got the real nature of society. You're never going to beat the bosses by ignorance.
No,
you're never going to beat your enemies by underestimating them.
The triumph of neoliberalism has been the suppression of class consciousness in many respects. And what we need is a rebirth of that class consciousness. We need that to be reconnected and people thinking about the system that they're part of and try to connect those dots and figure out why these structures exist. Your position on imperialism as a party, your position on Gaza, your position on what's been happening with Iran, and the ineptitude or the placatory, litigious nature of the incumbent political class. Can you give me some thoughts on that in terms of where you stand and where you think our incumbent political class stand on these matters?
Yeah, it's a disgrace. I mean, I mentioned we were in the Parliament. We were the party that led the anti-war movement against the war in Iraq in 2003, didn't we? The Scottish Socialist Party. We're in favour of peace. We want peaceful solutions to conflicts. Warmongering in Ukraine, warmongering in Iran, warmongering in Gaza, warmongering solves nothing. These are fundamental political problems got to be solved by people recognising peaceful solutions where you respect the other person's point of view. And the Scottish Socialist Party is profoundly anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, empire building. The role that Bush plays in the world today. The warmongering of Starmer, really makes my blood boil. What you've seen in the war in Ukraine, for example, perhaps 1 million young men killed on both sides for a war that should have been totally avoidable. A conflict between Putin on the one hand and NATO on the other has led to the slaughter of perhaps 1 million young men from both sides. Absolutely tragic for no purpose whatsoever.
Yeah. What do you think about slightly on a different direction, but when you look at this with China and the way and this notion of BRICS and stuff like that, have you got thoughts about that? Would you want Scotland to be part of a BRICS kind of thing? Is that something that would be? Is this? Are we getting into too abstractive thinking here, or is this something that's
I think you'd have to change the name and add another S if you did. But I mean, with China, the fascinating thing about China is I'm of an age, Bob, where I never knew anybody from China. I never knew anybody who'd been there. It was a closed society, And I look at the world that I've grown up in. Colin, and if the 20th century belonged to the United States, in other words, from 1900 to 2000, that had transformed itself beyond imagining, the 21st century belongs to China.
Yeah.
The development of China, you know, in the second biggest economy in the world, 1.4 billion people, the things they're doing there, absolutely astonishing from where they've coming from.
Yeah.
And that's worth examining. I spent most of COVID when I was locked indoors reading up about China. I read a guy, Martin Jacks, do you ever remember him? He was the editor of Marxism Today. He's based in Hong Kong, and he was explaining how China had developed, where it had come from, etc., and the astonishing technological, academic, cultural development of China. That's a fascinating question.
Definitely, and just that sort of that relationship between capital and the state that they've got there. You know what I mean? It's lifted incomprehensible amounts of people out of poverty. It's a different way of doing things, and it's inspiring in many ways. You know what I mean? People might have got all kinds of questions and issues over you know, the supposed human rights in China and all this stuff. I think it pales in insignificance when you look at what's actually occurred to the country.
I mean, one statistic that jumped out at me, Bob, was that in the 10 years, I think it was from 2011 to 2021, in the 10 years, that 10-year period, China poured more concrete, more steel, built up more infrastructure than the United States of America did in the century.
Yeah.
From 1900 to 2000. In 10 years. That's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is.
My granddad was a steel worker. You know, that concrete, steel, coal, power, electricity, development of high-speed rail, roads, you know, harbours, etc., trade. 10 years, absolutely amazing. I mean, I don't know whether I would last 2 minutes in China. They'd probably take me out and shoot me, because it's a one-party state, and I know they're particularly fond of criticism, are they? But putting that to one side, I'd like to go there and see it for myself.
Beldam Lascar says, it's China's century, we should be seeking ways to build bridges.
Maybe we'll have to learn Mandarin then.
I'm telling you, on part alone, you've got my vote, Colin. Like, you know, China's socialism has to be judged with the material reality of the world and the world's economy, according to Quan Ban Jun Rocks. I think is that a Chinese name we've got there?
Wow.
You were a Motherwellian from your origins.
I'm a Lanarkshire boy. That's
Tell
right.
me,
Yes.
and so were you sad the day the Craig came down? Were you there when
I was there. I was there with my daughter, and you know, we were standing. You filmed it. You know, I think it was probably days of digital cameras and all that. And the big blue. Remember the big blue tower with Ravenscraig on it, and then you had the cooling towers.
Yeah.
And I remember my mum and my dad, my sister and me were there, and my daughter, she's only 2. And just at the amount, when we were about to blow it up, I thought it'd be a loud bang. She's only 2. I thought I'd pick her up, right? And all you can see is me right across my dad's 40s, falling down my arm, right? So it was a sad day, of course it was. But the steel industry in Motherwell, Lanarkshire, had been in its knees for a long time before they blew it up and that. I mean, there's still 100 people working in the steel industry in the DL plant in Motherwell. Right. And I had close links with them. But yeah, I consider myself a steel workers laddie. Yeah, and the town went into sharp decline after that, didn't it? Yeah. It's a depressing place. I go back there a lot and all that. I've been there for the football. It's like when it was thriving, you know, it was a town with well-paid jobs, with everything going for it, you know, a lot of buzz about it. Now it looks like rather dilapidated. It needs help. It needs redevelopment. But this inequity and this deprivation is replicated throughout the country. It's ignored by these propagandists. When you see the SNP kind of come in with they actually use a lot of that money, that Creative Scotland money and whatnot, as part of their cultural representation. They pour that into their propagandising about how wonderful Scotland is. You wouldn't really know the depth of despair that exists in the country if you paid attention to anything that these cats say. No, and tell you what, you'll know this for your canvassing in the last few weeks. You go to parts of Edinburgh you've maybe not been to for a while. There's real poverty in this city. 100%. There's real. You know, people are really toiling and they need help urgently. Not going to get it for this government. No, this is why I also find this. There's 2 things that I'd like to mention here just before we wind up. One is there's a propensity on those that are in Holyrood. I had an argument with Lorna Slater and Tommy Shepherd recently about this. You know, these are council issues, these are government issues. This is an obfuscating position, isn't it? It's ridiculous to make these statements, and it's a complete cop-out on their part. The government can legislate and put pressure on the council. The idea that we should be
spending another £100 million odd on George Street. All of this money being poured into the public money being poured into the city centre that's already been cleansed of essentially locals. It's now just a sort of an entertainment space for tourism and transients. You know that a lot of that money shouldn't be getting spent there. There's also a real, insidious, plan of managed decline going on in Edinburgh, especially with Princes Street and whatnot. You see this in the city centre. There's a real agenda at play by private developers. We've essentially ceded the whole control, the civic management of the city to private developers and their shills. Have you got any ideas about that? Have you got any thoughts about that in terms of what's actually happening
to
the
city? I think the
city?
same applies to Edinburgh as applies to Scotland as a whole.
Yeah.
The people in charge have forgotten what their priorities should be. Edinburgh city centre is increasingly aimed at a tourist market worldwide. They forgot that the priorities of this city should be upon the citizens who live here. Our priorities. That's not to be exclusive. I like people coming from abroad. I like to travel myself, etc. But both the Scottish Government and the Council have lost sight of what they're expected to provide, and they're turning the city centre into a Harry Potter theme park.
Yeah.
That we're supposed to walk around dressed as
goblins.
Exactly, yeah. So, if that's your one, if you want to, that's fine by me, but it's not going to make much of a difference to the real needs of the society.
Yeah, there's also a real sense of there's a sort of attack on the sort of travel routes of the city as well. There's a real sort of thirst. All this money that's been spent on this, this green sort of cycling infrastructure and stuff like that. You'll notice that the Green Party they're massively anti-car, and I think there's a class issue here as well. I don't think it's particularly recognised. There's a real sort of propensity for people to be saying, if all these roads should be shut. They almost want everybody just walking or cycling. But the people that are advocating for this have probably all got electric vehicles, and are in these categories where they can actually still travel around.
Well, I seen a thing you had the other day. Your words and actions were drawn to my attention in the spat you had with Lorna Slater about the Holyrood Park. And you were saying that she wanted to stop people travelling through Holyrood Park. Well, I can let you know that I drive through Holyrood Park 4 times a week on my way to the SSP stall in the east end of Princes Street, right? But the big issue for me is I want Holyrood Park, I want that Radical Road reopened.
Of course, definitely.
That Radical
likewise.
Road, it's almost like we're being sanitised out of this. That's our history.
Yeah.
I used to go up that Radical Road when I was preparing for First Minister's questions. I take my speech and
get a wee bit of
practice
thinking time up there,
because it overlooks the Parliament, overlooks the city. Reopen the Radical Road. That's the priority for Holyrood Park.
I agree with you with that. Hume used to walk it every day, apparently.
I used to see him. Was it Sir Alec Douglas Hume you meant?
No, but it boils my piss, that, to be honest. I grew up round the corner from it, what I mean? And I feel like there does seem to be a sort of strange kind of a thirst to control these sort of public spaces, you know what I mean? It just seems to be unnecessary. I don't understand. Yeah. I mean, they're going on, maybe it's like a litigative thing about like there's rocks falling. It's like, it's the side
it needs
of
repaired, right?
Maybe,
but
you know what I mean?
It's been shut for about 5 years.
It's ridiculous. It's outrageous. I agree.
And the Radicals, man, we want to remind them the Radicals. They came through, they were unemployed, they came here through from Glasgow and West to petition for poor relief, and they made them build a road so the Queen could take her carriage up the side of the hill there.
And then Colin Fox could walk it before.
No, but on the Ordnance Surveys match, it's referred to as the Radical Road.
No, that's correct. Absolutely, that's correct. You're going to scrap the council tax, freeze prices, renegotiate PFI. Education, anything you want to say about education before we wind up? Yeah,
I mean, I'm not a native of Edinburgh, as you know. I come here from Motherwell. I lived in London for 10 years before that. I arrived in Edinburgh. I was working in the Inch News. I know people like yourself who are cultured know about the Inch News, the wee newspaper. And I ran this story. I picked up a statistic here that says 1/4 of all the kids in Edinburgh go to private school.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? So I phoned up this bureau. It's called, they like to call themselves the independent sector, as you know. And I says to the woman, I wonder if you can help me. I'm working a wee story for the Inch News about 25% of kids in Edinburgh go to fee-paying private school. I know you call it public school, but it's nothing public about it, it's private, right? And she goes, no, that's not right, she says. It's much higher. And I goes, what? You're joking? What? What? I was gobsmacked.
It's
and
like
she
40%
says,
or something,
I don't know why you're surprised. She says, I think you'll find it's higher elsewhere. I goes, Mrs. Where is it going to be higher elsewhere? London, she says. I says, I've just lived in London for 10 years. The idea that 1/4 of the kids in London go to private school, man, you need to get out more, right? the fact is, Edinburgh is Jekyll and Hyde, isn't it? That's a really good illustration. This is a city of Miss Jean Brodie on the one hand, and J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter, and this is a city of Trainspotting and James Connolly and a working class city. And I'll say to people when they're on the tour guide and all that, and the bus guide will say, this is a castle was built by Mary Queen of Scots, and this one was built by King this and King this and Queen this, and I'll lean over and go, she never laid a brick. This is a working class city, and we need to take it back and have working class priorities about housing, healthcare, education, standard of living, and our priorities need to be put at the top of the table as far as tomorrow's election is concerned.
Hear, hear. Colin Fox, it's been an absolute pleasure talking
to you. Mine too, Bob. You're not as mad as people make out, Bob.
Come on, why would they say that now? Why would they say that?
Fantastic.
They've got an agenda at play, like, you know.
Fantastic.
Beldermuscar says, 100% if elected, can the SSP promise to jail the placemakers? Colin, best of luck for
Thank you very much.
for tomorrow. You're in all eight regions on the list. You've got some great candidates there on the list. Is Natalie?
Natalie's number 2 and Ali's number 3 on the list here in the Lothians.
Some great candidates there.
Fantastic.
So I would be imploring anybody, if you're thinking about voting, if you've got an SSP candidate there, well, you do, to give the SSP your
and then
vote.
come and see me in Princess Street Wednesday, Thursday and Friday. You're all welcome. That's where I have my surgeries, 12 till 2 every week.
Right, well, we need class politics. We need class politics back in the Parliament. We need working class representation in Holyrood, and I can't think of anybody better to do that than Mr Fox himself. So Colin, once again, thanks so much for joining me this morning, and we'll catch up. Will you be at Ingolston?
Maybe, if they invite me. I'm waiting in the call saying, Colin, come and collect your seat.
What did you get in on? Was it 5%?
5.2%, yeah. According to John Curtis, it shouldn't have been possible, but what does he know?
What does he know, indeed? Exactly. Right, Colin, have a good day, man.
Thanks
Thank you so much.
Bob.
Cheers,
Take
man.
care.
Catch you later. Cheers.